Greetings. I'm Ken Bodle, and this is session 2 of our study together at Westside United Methodist Church on peace in an anxious world. Greetings. May peace be with you, and may peace be on your household wherever you are viewing from. Let us join together in the prayer of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The word for this session is acceptance. Acceptance is a big part of the serenity prayer. I have a copy of the serenity prayer I use as a bookmark. I read it as I start reading each night. The words serenity, courage, and wisdom are in bold red letters. But the word acceptance is written in ordinary typeface, no different than the rest of the words in the prayer. But acceptance is what leads us from anxiety to serenity to courage to wisdom. For a lot of us, acceptance is seen as a passive word. Many of us would rather change things or change someone or change ourselves than to practice acceptance. In the book Finding Peace in an Anxious World, Brittany Isaacs says many of us would like to change the serenity prayer. She says many of us would change the serenity prayer to read like this: God, grant me the serenity to change the things I cannot accept, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Her prayer is, I want to change something. I don't want to accept any things. I want to change the things that I don't like. Written this way, the prayer gives me permission to control my own destiny and everyone else's also. Written this way, the prayer is a self-centered prayer. It becomes about us and our ability to control things. But we are not in control. So as we start the serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. I may be saying, God, let me be at peace that I'm not in control. God, it's your creation. God, you are sovereign. God, you see the world different than I do. So I'm going to take time, God, to listen to you. And we do that in the church with spiritual practices like Bible reading and prayer and worship. And these are to be practiced not as spiritual busy work, but as time to listen to what God is saying to us. Today, the main biblical text that we will be looking at is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 through 8. And it says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be a healing for your flesh and refreshment for your body. Hear those words again. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be a healing for your flesh and refreshment for your body. Again, I would like you to look at this scripture this week using that Lectio Divino practice. And for me, what jumped out at me in doing this was that not to rely on my own insight, not to be wise in my own eyes. That's going to lead me to anxiety. But if I trust in God and I lean on God, I am promised healing for my flesh and refreshment for my body. As we look at this text, we see a reorientation of our focus from self to God. We're told that we are not to rely on our own insights, not to be wise in our own eyes. So much of our anxiety comes from the idea that we need to control everything. We want to be in control of the situation so we can determine the outcome. We try to control people because we know what's best for us, mainly, but we'll say for them too. Or we try to control the situation so they can't hurt us. We try to use things that we sense give us control, like power or money or careers or education. And I'm not belittling our God-given ability to reason and work for good in this world, but we shouldn't trust ourselves so much that we omit or exclude God from the picture. Instead, we are told we are to trust in the Lord, acknowledge the Lord, and fear the Lord. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Fear the Lord means that we have an awe, a reverence for God. Really, it is to worship God. It's not cowering in some corner hiding from God. It is standing before God and worshiping for who He is and who we are, just as we are, as we stand there before Him with no pretense. That's fear of the Lord. That's being in awe of God. And we are promised that leads to wisdom and understanding. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." As we worship God, have awe and reverence for God, this leads to knowledge, wisdom, and we are to turn away from evil. Now, you might not like what I'm about to say next, but turning away from evil, folks, is more like turning away from self-centeredness. We turn away from doing it our way, and we turn to God, and we are in awe of God, and we say, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow what you say. I'm going to follow what you say. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. What's it mean to trust God? With your whole heart? What does that look like to you? Brittany Isaac suggests that trusting God allows us to accept and see the world, ourselves, and our loved ones as they really are. And she goes on and says, trusting in God with our whole heart allows us to accept and see others for who they are and we are. You know, trusting God and seeing people how they are, seeing that they're not any different from us. We're all broken. We all have issues. And their issues don't exclude them from the love of God or having troubles. And my issues don't accept me from loving God, or God loving me, I should say, in both cases, and still having issues. But if we trust God, we see everybody as who they are. And when we're honest about who we see each other as we are, we don't have to control them because that's who they are. And we don't have to put on pretense because we can be who we are. Trusting God can lead us to reorder our priorities, I guess. The things of this world that we once thought were important have less power and control over us, less sway over our lives. Trusting God with our whole heart can lead us not trying to meet the expectations of this world that is broken anyways and disordered. We see that just in the world that we're living in right now. The world is broken and disordered. Why would we want to live up to that standard? Instead, of living by the values of the world. We live according to God's values: love, grace, mercy, and forgiveness. This week, I'd ask you to focus on those scriptures from Proverbs. Practice the Lectio Divina. There'll be a handout talking about what acceptance is. I'd like you to look that over. And the spiritual practice will be a roadmap that Pastor Denise will explain. And it might seem a little odd for you, to say the least. But I invite you to work on that roadmap. And again, as you work on it and you get done with it, don't have to put your name on it if you don't want to. Maybe post it on the Facebook page. Take a picture and post it on Facebook anonymously somehow. So if you don't want to be known that this is my roadmap. And let's see how we journey on this road to acceptance. Peace be with you. Amen.
Ken, thank you again for another great study this week. As Ken promised, there's a couple of resources that go along with our study on acceptance. The first one is a What is Acceptance handout. It's a series of 4 quotes that might help you to further refine your definition of what acceptance is. The next one is a roadmap. And the author of Finding Peace in an Anxious World, one of the authors, in this case, Brittany Isaac, she talks about how in Proverbs, there's a frequent mention about following God's path. And so you can use the image of a path or a roadmap as you identify the ways in which you can accept things. So you can move through anxiety from a place of anxiety to acceptance, and then ultimately to courage, which will be covered in another session of this study. So just to give you an example, COVID, I think, is something that has caused a lot of anxiety for a lot of us. And before I recorded this session, I was looking at the statistics, and the number of deaths in Clearfield County had increased yet again. Well, the number of deaths as a result of COVID is enough to make anyone anxious. At the same time, I have to acknowledge that I have no control over the number of deaths, whether they're increasing or decreasing. And so I have to accept that that has already happened. There's no changing that. But then hopefully the next point on my road path would include the courage to continue with the social distancing and the efforts that we have been maintaining in order to prevent people from passing this disease from one another. So that might be my roadmap, and you maybe find something similar, or maybe you are suffering from anxiety or concern over a completely different topic. And so the roadmap may be helpful for you in that regard. But what I'd like to focus on today is a spiritual practice, a prayer practice, if you will, known as the welcoming prayer. Now, it's a little odd, I have to admit, because it's not asking God to change anything. It's not calling for us to change anything in ourselves, but rather it is a tool that can be helpful for teaching our hearts the practice and discernment of acceptance. As Ken mentioned, acceptance does not come easy to us by any stretch of the imagination. And so in the welcoming prayer, we have 3 stages. And the great thing about the welcoming prayer is it's very brief, and it can be done anywhere, anytime, in any situation. Whenever you find yourself starting to get anxious, this is a great way to acknowledge it and to let it go. So the first of these 3 stages is to focus, feel, and sink in. And simply it's a matter, you might want to close your eyes if that makes it easier or more comfortable for you. Sort of close your eyes and just sink into, what is it that I'm feeling right now? Am I anxious? Am I upset? What's going on in my emotional being right now? And so we simply, without trying to accept or change anything about it, and certainly not to judge ourselves harshly in any way, shape, or form, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Just acknowledge what you're feeling. And then we move on to stage 2, the welcoming and naming. In this instance, we simply out loud say, this is what I'm experiencing. And we do so by welcoming that emotion. Remember, our emotions are given to us by God. They're neither good nor bad. That's how we react to them. And so this can be a good way of reacting by speaking it, naming it, if you will. And so, for example, if I'm afraid, then perhaps what I need to say is, welcome fear. Or if I'm in pain, welcome pain. Or if I'm confused, well, that happens quite a bit, welcome confusion. I'm simply expressing the truth of what I'm experiencing right now. And then the third stage of this welcoming prayer is to let it go and give it to God. In this case, I've stopped. I felt, what is it that's going on in my emotional being right now? I've welcomed it, I've named it, and now I need to release it. I need to release it both physically, perhaps I need to take a deep breath or relax my muscles. I need to release it emotionally. If I'm feeling fear, I need to, again, sort of buck up and move past that. And perhaps a mantra or phrase might be of use for me in this case as well, such as, I let go of the desire for security and affection and control. And isn't acceptance the opposite of control? And we have a difficult time giving that up. Or perhaps something else like this. I let go of the change, I let go of the desire to change what I'm experiencing. That can also be a big part of accepting. Again, not all things are under our control. Some things we just have to accept. And so the welcoming prayer can help us to acknowledge, understand what we're experiencing, name it, and then let it go and give it over to God. And so again, if I'm feeling anxiety, just stop and rest. What am I feeling? Name it. Welcome fear. And then let it go. I let go of my desire to feel confident and secure. Very brief, but a way in which we can acknowledge our feelings and then let God take over. It doesn't mean that the feelings go away completely, but it does help us to acknowledge where we are and move through and past that. I hope you have a great day. And as always, let us know how you are responding to these Bible studies. You can comment on our Facebook page or reach out to us via email. We'd love to hear from you.